we force ourselves too much, get too much, until we forget just being. Hi, I'm Isabel Rolo, and welcome to the show, Let It Shine. Hello, welcome to Let It Shine show. Today is with us again Rom Fernandez. Welcome back to Let It Shine show.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
It was great to having you in the show back. And for the people that they don't have the chance to know who is Rom, who is Rom?
Interesting question. Well, I have a doctorate in anthropology. I went to McGill University, but I grew up in Orange County. And my father was from Spain, and my mother was American of Polish descent. And I taught for a few years in anthropology at the University of British Columbia. And I came back to California and worked with my family in the wood business. But I always had a side interest in flamenco and classical guitar.
Wow.
And for 25 years, I've been importing and distributing, wholesale distributing fine Spanish guitars. And I had an interest in Portuguese music, so I wound up playing Portuguese guitar and some other ethnic instruments, charangos and all.
So you play the guitar and you make the guitar?
I have made guitars from scratch, and I'm known for doing French polishing. I have a video on French polishing. French polishing is a hand technique for finishing with a little pad on the guitar. We use shellac, and it takes about 30 hours to do a good guitar. A few of these instruments I've done. I've done this one, which is a copy.
It's a beautiful guitar.
Yeah,
you have many of the guitars here.
Yeah.
And you'll be explaining to us about all different kinds of guitars. So.
Yeah, my intention here is to show the history of the Spanish guitar family back 500 years. Because there's small guitars and big guitars, and there's aristocratic guitars and folkloric guitars, but they all have some similar things, and pretty much they all come from Spain and Portugal.
And for example, this guitar, I see that it's smaller and it's a beautiful guitar. This is the older guitars in the collection?
This one's a copy. It's a copy of a Renaissance guitar. So it's about, it's a copy of an instrument that was drawn in about 1550. And so this is considered a Renaissance guitar. It has 7 strings. There's 2 strings here. They're in octaves. There's 2 more strings here in unison, and then a single string. So even though it's 7 strings, and you can count the number of strings that there would be up here in the pegs, these are wooden pegs, it's considered a 4-course guitar. And this instrument is interesting in various ways because of the shape, and also it has, the frets are tied on, and which is an interesting thing, because then they could change the tuning, which is a whole complicated topic we won't get into right now. This instrument, all right, so let me explain what the parts are. This is called the bridge. This is the top or the soundboard. This is the rosette. This, of course, the back and the sides. This is the neck, and then on the neck goes the fingerboard, and then these are wooden pegs, all right? And the tuning for this is like the first 4 strings of the guitar, and this instrument, sort of an aristocratic instrument because it had double strings. Strings were very expensive for makers, and it has a wonderful sound. And let me just play a little bit. I'm going to play a little bit of something called the folius, which is the most popular, the oldest popular piece of music. And there's a certain chord pattern to this, and people would improvise within this form. So this may sound familiar.
they take you into
Yeah,
the medieval times.
a very loud sound
Yeah.
for such a small instrument.
What is the wood that they was using for this?
This wood, they always use a softwood for the face. A softwood means a wood that it's not necessarily physically soft, but it's reproduced with pine cones. So in Spanish, they talk about pino, all right? Pino abeto would be spruce. So this one is probably a kind of spruce. And the back of this is probably a sycamore or maple. I'm not quite sure because there's a little bit of color to it. And then very typically, they would use some kind of mahogany on the neck, and then the better instruments will use ebony, which is a black wood on the fingerboard.
And was men who was playing this instrument, or was more women?
Both men and women played these instruments.
Because I see that it's smaller, so it will be more easy for a woman to play.
The guitar became bigger in the 20th century, mainly because under Segovia, and they had to fill large concert halls. This was a proper size instrument for people to play locally. Many of these old instruments, there aren't any examples of this instrument, but you can see them in many old paintings. All right, so this one is a early Renaissance instrument, and Renaissance for instruments usually goes from 1400 to about 1600. And then the next instrument.
Yeah. This is your favorite, Rom?
Oh, well, I like this a lot.
Okay.
I haven't been playing it a lot, but.
Because your passion is the guitar?
Yeah, well, the Spanish guitar, I play them all.
Okay.
I pick them up. I play a lot of flamenco because it's more popular to play these. I play these at home.
But you will say the guitar, the classic guitar is
Oh, yeah. Well, I started playing classical guitar when I was 13, and I sang in choirs when I was 6 and 7 and played piano for a few years. And then my uncle had a guitar. He lived in Anaheim. We'd moved out here, and it was a Mexican guitar. It was one of the worst guitars we had you'd ever see. It was a $15 Mexican guitar, and the neck was so twisted that the first string was not even on the body. But I wound up learning from a very good Japanese concert player who had lived in Brazil, and that sort of changed everything. I wound
What
up.
is his name?
His name was Seiko Sissoko. He's been dead for a few years, but he had a store in Anaheim, and he taught many of the people in Orange County who had become concert artists.
More your teacher?
He was the most important one. And then I went to college, and I met Chuck Kaiser, who played flamenco. He was an American, but he had studied with Diego del Gastor in Spain. And then I studied with a few people in Spain. And then in Canada, I wound up working with Portuguese musicians, with Arthur Gaipo, and we played professionally. And I was playing Spanish guitar to accompany the Portuguese instruments.
You fell in love with the guitar. Do you remember?
Well, I was interested in music from the time I was very young. And actually, I remember that my uncle in the early 50s gave me a ukulele. And my uncle Julio.
A child? Or?
Yeah, I was a child. And my uncle, when Julio, who was my godfather, he was from Spain, Julio Garrido, he was my grandmother's brother. And he used to give us everything, all kinds of toys. And he gave me a ukulele, but I broke the string, and my mother put it away, and I didn't see it ever again. And then I went. I picked up Spanish guitar here. Was born in New Jersey, and came here when I was 13. And I didn't have a piano, and my uncle had a guitar, and I figured, oh well, let me learn this. And
so you fell in love with the practice of the guitar.
Yeah, the guitar is a very addictive kind of instrument. If you sit down and play, you watch somebody who really gets into it, and it's an addiction.
And tell me about this beautiful guitar.
All right, this one is a Baroque guitar. So this is probably from about 1620, 1650 to 1750, something like that.
So the guitar I see then is becoming bigger.
Yeah, it's become bigger. Yeah. It still has a carved rosette, and instead of 4 courses, it has 5 courses. All right, the first course is 1 string, and then the other strings are double strings. And one of the interesting things about this, it has something called reentrant tuning, where the middle strings are the lowest strings. So if you listen to this, and these last strings are an octave apart. All right, so the shape.
So they expand the sound, the shape of the guitar.
Yes, they've changed the shape. It's deeper, it still has tied-on frets, which I used to think was a defect, but actually with tied-on frets, you can change the placement of the frets and make the tuning even sweeter. Modern guitars are all out of tune, just slightly.
How often you tune a guitar?
Every time you pick it up,
Yeah.
and sometimes in between. These are all, these strings are nylon strings, but before the Second World War, the strings were mainly gut. And then they learned about 300 years ago how to take strings, they take silk filaments and wind them. All right?
So it'll becoming perfect with the time.
Yes, and so in recent times, they use nylon filaments for the bass strings, which are metal wound with a silk, with a core of nylon, and then the other ones are monofilament, which look like fishing line. All right. So this one is tuned. They're tuned the same, except that this one has an extra string. So.
Like flamenco.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit closer. Right. But
Yes.
I brought this one because it's similar to this. This is a charango.
This is so cute.
This
I love
is
the charango,
yeah.
the durango.
The charango. Yeah,
Charango?
the charango comes from Bolivia, and this one's made out of an armadillo. But the interesting thing is that this instrument, the charango, is a native variation of the Baroque guitar. All right. So this instrument was brought by the Spaniards to the silver mining area, and then the natives made
Something
the instrument
smaller.
of this.
Yeah. Very creative.
And because the way it's tuned an octave above the other instruments, so it has a very interesting and loud sound.
Using that one more in Peru?
Peru and Bolivia and Argentina and Ecuador. And people from those countries, they travel around the world with these. These are lovely instruments. This is one of my favorite
Sound
instruments.
great too. And what is the next?
Okay. Now this instrument here, this is a
it's a beautiful.
This is a genuine it's an authentic guitar from 1800, 1802, something like that.
And you can play that.
Yeah. Well, I have not fixed this because rather than restore it, we keep it in its natural state.
Okay.
Rather than take off the finish, because I can make it look modern and beautiful, but the idea is to preserve the antique look. So this instrument has, it's interesting, it has a hole in the top, which is very typical in Spain to hang the guitar. I found this in Madrid, but I think it's actually from Austria, this guitar. It has a little peg in the back. It has what we call, this is called a, in English, we call this a ice cream cone heel. The finish is very much like a violin. All right, it probably has some dragon's blood, which is a coloration. It has a softwood top and a hardwood back.
Yeah, it's different kind of wood.
Which?
Different kind of wood.
Oh, the color, yeah. The wood is probably maple or sycamore, and then the ornamentation, some of it's painted on and some of it's inlaid. But this one, it doesn't have a raised fingerboard, and it has either ivory or bone for the frets. Okay, and they're fixed frets. And usually on guitars it comes to the 12th fret, but this one 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11, 12, all right? So this is this is a production kind of instrument from Northern Europe, all right, being influenced by some of the Spanish.
Yeah. So it's more like European style, more Northern Europe.
Yes, and this, it had a peg holder here and down the bottom too, so it was played with a cord like this.
Okay. Yeah, the more of the guitars of this time, they was carried with this, with the cord?
Depends. You see them on a lot of them. It's gotten to the point where classical players, formal players, will usually play seated and without that. But you find in the 19th century there were players, even of concert classical music, playing with the chord. The chord is just a different way to hold it. And the instrument's quite small. On a standard guitar, it's larger. And this is a quattro. Quattro for four. It has 4 strings. But this is a modern instrument, and relatively inexpensive, from Venezuela. And this is interesting in 2 ways, because it's similar to these old instruments, all right? But it became a popular folkloric instrument, and it's a very loud instrument. And I've seen them from Bolivia and from Mexico. And so this is probably the typical folkloric instrument 500 years ago, whereas this was a more elaborate one because it had more strings. Strings were very expensive, all right? So this one...
That one will be more the guitar for the Americas?
Yes, right. And an inexpensive instrument, but a good instrument for just playing and for dancers.
It's comfy.
Yes,
and it's for easy, small hands.
It's easy to play. All right, this one here, this is a cavaquinho.
Look like the ukulele.
Right. This comes from Portugal. Probably I've traced them back to about 1719 in Braga, which is in northern Portugal.
And the wood?
And this wood is a kind of walnut, and the face is a kind of, it could be poplar, but it's probably, this one's probably spruce. And it has a hardwood here, some kind of rosewood, and a blackwood for the fingerboard. But this, let me get this one here.
Oh. This is similar to a little bit bigger.
This is the original instrument, all right? It's called a braguinha, or cavaquinho, or machete, or a 5-string one is called rojão, and they all come from Portugal. And then from Portugal, they went to Brazil, and they have a Brazilian kind of cavaquinho, which is slightly larger, which is used for sambas and choros, all right? This is played... It's just a folkloric instrument in Portugal with steel strings, all right? This kind of instrument was brought in 1879 from Madeira Island, which is owned by Portugal, to Hawaii, all right? And the...
So that one was before than the ukulele, or
that
one was the original ukulele?
This precedes the ukulele,
the ukulele,
all right? And I'm going to show you the difference. All right, basically, 1879, the Portuguese brought it to Hawaii, and then the Hawaiians adopted it very quickly, and they changed it slightly by using the same wood for the back and for the face. All right?
This is beautiful.
But the first makers in Hawaii were Portuguese, Diaz and Nunez. All right, and then this kind of instrument, the Hawaiians adopted it, and then they were singing love songs and also political songs in their own languages, which the Anglo-Americans didn't know. And then in about 1915, the ukulele was brought to San Francisco, and it was played there was an international exposition there. And so the Hawaiians introduced the ukulele to the United States. And by the mid-20s, it became part of jazz. All right? And in the mid-20s, it was being played on Broadway, and some George Gershwin songs were initially performed on the ukulele. And there was a man named Ukulele Ike, Cliff Edwards, who was a very famous ukulele player who became Jiminy Cricket. All right? So the ukulele, when it was adopted into the United States, it became central to American popular music. And in the 20s and into the 30s, all the piano sheet music for popular music had ukulele chords. All right, so here's the difference in the sound between these two instruments. Here's the, that's the cavaquinho with metal strings. And then here's the, with modern nylon strings, all right? This one's made out of mahogany, and it's mahogany on the face and the back. And This is made in Japan, but this is a very high-end one. The great makers in the United States are Martin, and this is just like a Martin instrument.
You are a collector of the guitar?
Well, not a big collector. I've imported thousands of guitars, and different instruments come to me, and once in a while I'll find something that I like. I've been playing with a ukulele group for a long time in Corona del Mar called the Oasis, and it's a senior citizen group. I started 20 years before I became a senior citizen, and they meet every Monday, and it's a really lively group. And they only knew the ukulele as an instrument from Hawaii, and I had all this experience and contacts with Latin countries, and they're always amazed when I bring and show them the predecessors and the cousins of all these instruments, because that's what they are. It's a big family.
So you will say then it's a guitar for every personality?
Well, the guitar, that's a good, the guitar is probably the most popular instrument in the history of the world, all right?
And born in Spain or in Portugal?
Well, actually, I have found there are pictures in Spain, drawings back to the 13th century from the Cantigas de Santa Maria, which were songs to the Virgin Mary. They were poems and songs. And you can look it up on the internet, and it's Cantigas de Santa Maria. And there's pictures of the guitarra latina and guitarra morisco. The guitarra latina looks almost like this. It has 4 strings, and they're drawings, of course, and paintings. But you can see that it's basically this instrument. So there are some people who try to push the history of the guitar back to the Babylonians and the Sumerians. And there were some instruments that had a body and a neck projecting, but they probably didn't have frets. And the real improvements of the instrument are much later. It's like we can call a car a chariot. They're Roman chariots, but there's a lot of difference between a chariot and a Maserati. But the Spanish, there are a number of innovations that the Spanish and the Portuguese made to these instruments. They made the wood very thin. There's bracing inside. The placement of the frets is a Western European idea. There's a special way, it's called even equal temperament, and many of the other.
And just for curiosity, the shape of the guitar, they look like
a woman.
A woman body.
Yeah, right.
So it's making in purpose, thinking in this way, or it's more for being more comfortable when
who
you
knows?
play?
Well, if you look at all the other family of instruments, if we look at fretted stringed instruments, you have lutes, all right, which are round back, all right, and there are Arab lutes which have no frets, and then there are European lutes which have frets, okay? So the lute and the guitar are very similar. And the other family of guitars are the citerns. The citerns is the family of steel-stringed instruments which have a teardrop-shaped body. So there's the mandolin or citern family, they're related. There's the lute family, and there's the guitar family. And those are all related because the same people were making them. These instruments are separate from the bowed instruments, all right, and the violin and the viol and all those instruments. And the lutes, much of the polyphonic music for Western Europe was began on the lutes, right, before the violin. So we have proto-lutes from the 1200s, all right? And
it's so interesting. It's like, thank you so much, Rom.
You're welcome.
So I feel that we are learning a lot today about the guitar.
Okay.
How many guitars do you think, how many different guitars is in the world?
How many different kinds in the world? I think there's hundreds.
Hundreds?
And the thing,
So
at
no any
least
number?
maybe thousands of different variations, and they change through times. As we see, this is rare to see this kind of instrument, and if you go on to Google, you'll see many variations of a Renaissance guitar. You'll see many variations of a Baroque guitar, and then I also, this is a guitar probably from about the 1820s to 1850s, and it's close to what the modern guitar is, but it's a little bit smaller, and by this point it So this is about
Yeah.
150, 180 years ago, and so it had gone from this in
to
a few
that.
hundred years to this.
And before, it was more women playing the guitar. than
Well,
men,
in the
right?
19th century, they figure 50 or 60% of the women played it because the guitar was an instrument of romance, okay? And so in the United States, people played the harp and then the guitar. And then in the 20th century, people would have piano dates. You know, in the 20s and 30s, you see this in old movies that the guy would come over and they'd play piano. And so the piano became the center for dating, okay? So,
And it's funny, that was the woman who played more the guitar than the men.
I found some pictures in Orange County in San Juan Hot Springs, which is southern Orange County, in 1890s, and I found 3 photographs of women playing guitars that are like this.
Wonderful.
And they were camping, and there's about 20 people, and the women are there with their guitars. So that was the Anglo culture, and then the Hispanic culture here too. I found a few things of women connected with guitars.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank
To learn how to play music and to do art, it's a matter of persistence. It's and practice over and over again. And as I mentioned to you privately here, one of the ideas that I had gotten when I was much younger was one of the art teachers had told us that Leonardo da Vinci had to draw the hand many times. They told us that it's very hard to draw a hand. And then, so you just try it. The first time's not good. And after you've done it 50 times or 100 times, you get pretty good. The same thing with this. For me, I've learned these other instruments because they're all just variations on one another. Oh, that's one of the important things I wanted to say, was that the guitar and the ukulele, hold this just for a moment. The guitar, let me find a guitar here, this one here. All right. The ukulele and these other instruments are tuned the same as the guitar on the 5th fret. So right here, just play these open. Just play the strings open. So everything I play on this instrument, I can play on that instrument instantly because it's just on the 5th fret, and it has less strings. All right, that's something I learned, but that knowledge helps me convert from one instrument to another.
See, to
I use
accommodate to the other one?
Yes, I use the same techniques going from one instrument to another. And I wanted to mention one other thing, was that these old instruments were played with the hand position like this, and then eventually in the 19th century it wound up being like this. So Segovia wound up playing like this, and before 1800 all these instruments are played like this, and then they wound up being played like this. So I've studied the techniques. There's old books you can find on all this on all these instruments, and now it's so much easier to find them. You can go onto the National Library in Madrid.
I mean, for the people that want to know more about guitar, you have a website?
I have a website, fernandezmusic.com.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
It was great to having you back in the show.
It was nice to be here.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And just remember, people, just let it shine.
See, you could do that. And 3 chords or 4 chords, you can play almost everything.
It's a great gift.
What?
Know? So I think that you're born like that.
You think I'm born like this way?
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
no.
Of course, you was practicing.
No, you have to practice.
Yeah, but
it's like Leonardo da Vinci.
Let it shine for everyone to see. Let it shine. Let it shine now. On the Let It Shine show.